Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
No days off. That's not a mantra. That's a vow you make when you decide to stop negotiating with comfort. Every time you pause for permission, every time you reward yourself prematurely, you teach your body to fear the very thing designed to set it free: consistency. The world isn't shaped by brilliance alone. It's shaped by force, repetition, and endurance. Talent gets applause. Pressure builds monuments. You don't get to talk about purpose if you treat your discipline like a mood. When you show up once, you impress people. When you show up every day, you terrify them. That's the difference. One speaks for attention, the other declares war. The man who takes no days off isn't obsessed with the grind. He's obsessed with eliminating doubt. Every gap in effort is an invitation for fear to multiply. Hesitation, delay, second guessing. They don't arrive when you're in motion. They breed in pauses. You leave the door open long enough, your ambition gets robbed in daylight. There's no fire alarm for that kind of loss. No public mourning for wasted days. It happens quietly, in the background, one missed effort at a time. And suddenly, your name is no longer associated with impact, but with potential. Potential is the nice way of saying you were dangerous once, but now you just remember what that felt like. The world doesn't care what your dream is. It watches how often you bleed for it. Your routine is your reputation in disguise, and when you take days off, you make a silent announcement. This matters, just not today. But the dream you say you want doesn't hear excuses. It only hears absence, and it punishes that absence by moving closer to the ones who kept showing up. You think the game is fair. It's not. It's brutal. It rewards the obsessed, the stubborn, the ones who show up after success, after failure, after humiliation, especially after humiliation. Because that's when most break. But the rare few, they stay, and their staying creates legacy. There is no ceremony for consistency. No fireworks for the man who trains in silence. But that man becomes something other people will never understand. He becomes inevitable. That's what daily effort does. It removes the element of surprise. The future bends toward you not by accident, but by pattern. You show up so often, so relentlessly, that even chaos has to respect your rhythm. That's not romance. That's mathematics. You become what you repeatedly do, not what you hope to do, not what you promise to do when your schedule aligns, but what you actually build under pressure, without applause, and especially without rest. Taking no days off isn't about burning out. It's about eliminating the idea that you're allowed to abandon your mission just because the weather changed. You don't serve your future by pampering your present. Discipline isn't about violence. It's about refusal. Refusing to let moods dictate moves. Refusing to let progress rely on feelings. Every time you move, when it's hard, when it's thankless, when it's raining in your mind, you carve out more of the man you were meant to become. Not the soft version, not the one that explains everything away. The real one, built from repetitions that didn't ask your opinion. You don't become dangerous because you had a good month. You become dangerous because you refuse to break pattern after a bad one. You don't get to pick which days matter. Every day is the test. The invisible camera is always rolling, documenting the moments where you could have quit but didn't. And those moments accumulate. They create gravity. When others walk into rooms hoping to be noticed, you walk in carrying your pattern. And patterns don't beg for recognition. They command it. That's the cost of being consistent. You trade temporary indulgence for permanent power. People will misunderstand you. They'll say you're obsessed, addicted, alone. Let them. They only say that because they've never met someone who refused to obey the calendar of mediocrity. Most people schedule ambition around their distractions. You schedule everything else around your ambition. That's why they can't relate. That's why they flinch when you say no days off. Because to them, discipline is punishment. But to you, it's identity. It's a language only those who've lived in the trenches of self-doubt and still moved forward understand. You can sleep, you can rest, but you don't pause the mission. There's always something you can sharpen: your focus, your stamina, your silence. The man who takes no days off doesn't always run, but he always moves. Sometimes forward, sometimes inward, but never nowhere. There are no vacations from vision, no commercial breaks in the pursuit of sovereignty. The second you disconnect, your doubt rehydrates. Your inner enemy, the one who lives on hesitation, gets fed. You don't leave that door open, you nail it shut. That's what no days off means. You'll get tired, you'll feel alone, you'll question the point. But then you remember, this isn't about mood. This isn't about being in the zone. This is about becoming someone whose existence is a zone, a force field of expectation, execution, and resolve. You train every day, not because it's dramatic, but because it's undeniable. The man who trains daily is a prophecy in motion. He doesn't beg for results, he collects them, relentlessly, quietly, without variance. That's the architecture of discipline. Not shouting louder, not chasing louder, but staying still in the storm, hands to the craft, eyes on the hour, no matter the season. Flow is not a luxury, it's a battle won. You don't stumble into it. You earn it one focused breath at a time. 15 minutes of uninterrupted immersion is the toll, a silence so pure it chokes out every external frequency. You sit down, the chaos still clinging to your skin, and you begin slowly, sloppily, until the gears click into place. That click is everything. It's not passion. It's not talent. It's the hum of your brain aligning with purpose. But just as easily as it comes, it's ripped from you. One vibration, one notification, one curious glance at the wrong second, and it's gone. The tunnel collapses. The signal vanishes, and you're spat back into static. That's the price. And it's why distractions don't interrupt greatness. They prevent it from ever being born. You think a day off is harmless, a reward, a rest. But flow doesn't pause politely while you recharge, it evaporates. The loop you spent days, weeks, months building, through sweat, repetition, and focus, doesn't freeze like a game save. It forgets you. It forgets your rhythm, your posture, your clarity. Like a lover turned cold, it refuses to come back the same way, because flow respects momentum. It obeys discipline. You miss a day and you don't just stop, you reset. You crawl back to the starting line and the climb begins again. The system doesn't forgive. It watches every moment off-grid. It lowers your temperature. You no longer burn. You simmer. And a simmering man is forgettable. People they think can hack flow with motivation caffeine, with playlists. But none of that matters if you haven't built the loop. The unbroken loop, daily exposure to difficulty, daily entrances into stillness. That's the only gateway to the trance that builds empires. And when you disrupt that rhythm, you don't just delay success, you fracture identity. You're no longer the man who executes. You become the man who used to. You walk around pretending you're still in it, but the loop is gone, your edge dulls, your speed slows. Your instincts stop whispering, because the silence you abandoned doesn't trust you anymore. You tell yourself it's just one day, just a break, just a breather. But momentum doesn't care about your excuses. It cares about signal, consistent signal. And when you cut that signal, even for a moment, the loop dies. That doesn't mean rest is bad. It means rest must be calculated, earned, engineered, not excused. A man in flow doesn't rest randomly. He plans it like a weapon, sharp, brief, and intentional, because he knows if he lets it linger, and the edge bends, and bent edges don't cut, they drag, they snag, they break under pressure. And that kind of break isn't visible until it's too late. Until the loop you thought you could re-enter spits you out like a stranger. Flow isn't some spiritual muse, it's a physiological system. Your brain reconfigures itself when it's immersed. Dopamine tightens, norepinephrine spikes, your sense of time bends. You become larger than your self-concept. But that transformation needs uninterrupted movement. You need to earn it each time. And when you take days off without architecture, your brain forgets the door. You show up again and the code is scrambled. You sit and the silence feels dead, not welcoming, not familiar. You stare at the same tools, but they don't respond. Because flow doesn't come back to tourists. It comes back to warriors. And warriors don't leave the field until the work reaches them back. Every man has a moment where he contemplates stopping. One skipped session, one undone task, one silent permission to not show up. That's where momentum dies. Not loudly, but softly. You don't even notice the shift until the loop is gone. You wake up one day and your confidence is half built. Your focus has fragments. Your execution has hesitation. And no one tells you it happened on the day you skipped. Because the system never warns you. It simply resets. And when it does, the man you were becoming is gone. In his place is the shell of potential again, staring at the wall like a stranger. Flow takes 15 minutes to enter, but only one moment of indifference to exit. You say discipline is hard. Try rebuilding a loop you spent 60 days crafting. Try recapturing silence after betraying it for entertainment. Try restarting when your brain no longer trusts you to finish. That's what days off do when taken without reverence. They tell your body what we're building isn't sacred, and the body listens. The neural pathways slow. The ritual collapses, the loop dies. You're left holding a blueprint with no muscle memory to act it out. That's not a pause. That's a funeral. You don't take days off because you're tired. You take them because you've stopped remembering what flow feels like. You've forgotten the violence of uninterrupted focus. The thrill of entering that tunnel where everything bends toward the mission. That's what you're trading when you bow to comfort. Not just progress, but access. You lose access to your best self. Not in theory, in biology. And no amount of motivation videos will reawaken that until you show up again, day after day, until the loop remembers you, until the trance reopens, until flow says, he's back. So you make a choice. You either build the loop with reverence or you live in rest disguised as discipline. There is no middle. You're either in momentum or in retreat. And momentum doesn't pause for pity. It doesn't wait for your schedule to align. It only obeys continuity. That's the religion of high performers. They don't take days off because they're robots. They take no days off because they remember what it cost to enter flow. And they're not willing to lose it for a hit of ease. And you think the grind is about sweat and repetition. But that's surface level mythology. The real consequence of stalling isn't physical, it's cognitive. After just 2 days without solving problems, your brain begins to decay, and not visibly, not with alarms. The sharpness fades, the elasticity weakens, the once quick leaps of logic start to slow. But that's not burnout, that's erosion. Your cognitive flexibility, your ability to switch between strategies, adapt under fire, and rethink in real time, drops by 40%. And it doesn't knock first, it just exits. Leaves you fumbling in moments where you used to glide, and you're not tired. You're dulled. That's what inaction does. It doesn't rest the mind. It rusts it. Momentum isn't the same as motion. A hamster runs in place. That's motion. But momentum is cognitive warfare. You're sharpening tools no one else can see. And you're conditioning yourself to think fast while bleeding. To make decisions not just under pressure, but through pressure. And that's why consistency matters. Not because you're feeding some hustle culture idol, but because your neural edge needs fuel, stimulation, and challenge. Fire. If you don't give it those things daily, it starts to soften. And soft minds don't conquer hard environments. They fold, and they daydream. They drown in options because they lost the instinct to cut through. Problem solving isn't a task. It's a weapon. Every time you face friction and navigate through it, your brain adapts. It learns aggression without chaos. It learns control under fire, and that rewiring becomes your edge in every domain. But miss a day, then two. Suddenly the edge goes blunt, your thinking calcifies, and you stop adapting and start repeating. That's when your life becomes a loop, not because you failed, but because your brain forgot how to break pattern. You didn't lose to laziness, and you lost to rigidity. And rigidity kills innovation. It murders clarity. It buries instinct beneath a mountain of second guessing. And you want to stay dangerous, solve problems every day. Doesn't matter if they're tactical, emotional, existential, and give your mind something real to cut its teeth on. Because your intelligence isn't static, it's conditional, and it performs in proportion to your exposure. You solve puzzles often, your brain becomes a blade. Miss a week, and it becomes decoration. Looks sharp and useless under pressure. And when the moment comes that demands speed, you won't have it. You'll hesitate, you'll stall, because you stop training for real-world velocity. Don't confuse momentum with grind. Grind can become mechanical, solace, just noise in motion. But momentum is precision. It's mental warfare disguised as daily effort. And when you train your brain to attack confusion with curiosity, not panic, you become dangerous. That doesn't happen through occasional engagement, and it happens through ritual. The man who practices daily, regardless of result, creates a psychological structure the world can't fracture. He becomes unshakable, not because life got easier, but because his cognition didn't degrade. Most people don't burn out, they rot. And the fire goes out not from overuse, but from lack of tension. No stakes, no urgency. They stop solving problems and the brain atrophies. And when that decay sets in, momentum dies, not loudly but invisibly, one slow day at a time. You don't even realize it until someone asks a hard question and you freeze. You weren't always like that. You just paused the loop, and the loop doesn't forgive. It resets. Like a muscle that withers after injury, the mind retreats to its lowest state reaction without clarity, and every field rewards sharp minds. It's not always about who works hardest. It's about who thinks best under chaos. Athletes, generals, founders, and creatives. The ones who last are the ones whose thinking doesn't break under speed. They see threats and pivot, not panic. And that ability is not talent. It's conditioning, and it erodes in days without exposure. That's why the rhythm matters. And you don't show up for the dopamine. You show up to keep the system responsive. And a responsive system outlasts motivation every single time. People talk about flow, but flow is just the aftermath of sustained focus on problems. You don't stumble into brilliance. You chase hard questions until your brain gets addicted to solving them. That's what sharpens the edges. That's what builds aggression without rage, and stillness without hesitation. And when you take a break without cause, without control, you're not resting. You're reversing. You're feeding decay. Because the brain doesn't care how hard you used to train. It only remembers today. So what do? And you build a loop that forces challenge. You confront discomfort by design. You inject tension into your systems. You ask, what can I dismantle and rebuild today? Because that rebuild keeps your perception fast, your decision-making ruthless, your identity active. And without that, you regress. And regression isn't always visible. Sometimes it shows up as dullness, as distraction, as hesitation in a room where decisiveness used to be your signature. And there's a cost to silence, But most don't see the invoice until it's too late. When you stop practicing, deliberately and with precision, the mind doesn't just rest, it starts erasing, piece by piece. And the neural circuits you carved with sweat and friction begin to unwind. Like soldiers without orders, they disband, and the skills you thought were permanent start slipping. Your recall fractures, accuracy dips, 16% gone after just 48 hours, and that's not burnout. That's cognitive erosion. Not a crash, but a slow dismantling of your edge. And the cruelest part, it feels like nothing and no sound, no warning. Just that one day you return, and suddenly your rhythm is fractured, your grip shaky, your instincts fogged. And that's the equation. Stop, repeat, forget. The brain isn't loyal to past effort. It only respects current engagement. And repetition is not just reinforcement, it's survival. Your skills don't stay alive by memory. They stay alive through motion, deliberate motion, and strategic friction. You don't retain because you learned once. You retain because you reclaimed it daily. And take 2 days off and the architecture of skill doesn't hold. What you thought was mastery was scaffolding. And without pressure to keep the structure upright, it collapses, slowly, quietly, until you're standing in the ruins of your own potential. And then you panic. Then you ask where it all went. But by then, the answer has already vanished from your nervous system. That's decay. Not loud and not tragic, silent. Your identity is wrapped in repetition. Not just the acts you perform, but the weight they carry in your biology. Mispractice. And you don't just delay growth. You start confusing the mind. Your recall mechanism begins to distort. It reaches for information it once had and finds a gap. That gap isn't forgetfulness, it's abandonment. And the mind punishes abandonment by deleting what you didn't defend. And because when you skip practice, you tell your brain this no longer matters. And your brain, ever efficient, obliges. And it starts reallocating resources, cutting power to circuits that used to define you. This isn't loss. It's exile. You've been exiled from your own competence. Practice is not an option. It's a covenant. When you skip it, and you break the contract between mind and ambition, and the damage isn't visible on the outside, your posture stays proud, and your voice may still carry confidence, but inside the engine sputters, the details slip, the recall shivers, and when it matters, when the lights are on and silence demands precision, you miss, not because you lack talent, but because your preparation was interrupted. You think you can pick it up where you left off, but the mind is a battlefield, and an unguarded terrain doesn't wait to be reoccupied. It gets taken. Every time you stop, you train the decay. That's the terrifying truth. And stopping becomes a lesson, too. A pattern the mind learns. If we pause, nothing dies immediately. And that thought becomes a virus. And you take longer breaks, you feel less urgency. Eventually, you forget what it felt like to be razor sharp. And here's the thing, and you don't notice the decay as it happens. You feel functional. Until one day, someone faster moves ahead. Someone more consistent takes your spot, and you're not sure why. Because you thought you still had it, but the truth is you left it behind 2 days at a time, and deliberate practice is the act of staying loyal to a future self who doesn't yet exist. Skipping it isn't rest, it's betrayal, and betrayal has a cost, not paid in guilt but in ability. The man who missed 2 days doesn't return the same, and he returns chasing the ghost of his own excellence. And that chase is exhausting, because what's lost to decay never returns in full. It comes back filtered, faded, a version that looks right but feels off. That's the haunting part. You remember who you were, but your hands don't. And your speed doesn't. Your clarity doesn't. That's the price of delay. You think you'll make up for it later? Double the effort. Stay up later and push harder next week. But practice isn't compounding interest. It's immediate currency. The value only holds when it's consistent, and you can't binge mastery. You can't crash study excellence. The mind learns best through rhythm, predictable, persistent rhythm. Break it, and you break the ecosystem your performance lives in. Your neurons don't care that you had a rough week. They respond only to consistency. Show up or dissolve. That's the contract. This is why the greatest don't just train. They protect their training. And they understand that stopping for too long doesn't lead to neutrality. It leads to rot. Every missed rep, every skipped session, and isn't just lost opportunity, it's regained doubt. The mind remembers slippage. It remembers that you chose silence over sharpening, and that memory corrupts your foundation. You feel less certain, not because life changed, but because your inner programming degraded. That's how decay works. It doesn't take everything at once. It takes enough to make you hesitate, and hesitation is death, and you've seen it in others. The man who once moved with certainty now second guesses. The artist who used to produce effortlessly and now overthinks every brushstroke. The speaker who used to command a room now searches for words. They didn't fall. They decayed.